You know, back in the 70s, when taxes were, the highest rate of taxation in the 70s was 70%. I don't want to return back to those things. I don't think that's a good thing. You know, so, and I wouldn't raise taxes. What I would do is say, take the money that we are collecting it and just have the government act as a referee so that this great system of ours, of capitalism, you know, is open and accessible to everybody else. So that means that if you are born, you know, to a drug-addicted mother, single mother living somewhere, and you as a human being enter into the world with that against you, that there is a program like a Head Start, which is proven to be effective in helping kids graduate high school. You know, you put the money into that so that that kid then has the ability to have access to the American dream. That's progressivism. So don't fall for this idea that, you know, we're just a bunch of limousine liberals who are just feeling guilty and want to, like, you know, give away some money or whatever. You know, I don't, that's not me, and I don't accept that.
We'll have 2-minute rebuttals on each side before we go to questions.
Well, there certainly are echo chambers and echo chambers. My point is that the echo chamber for progressivism is the society as a whole. And that puts us in the position of the house slave. We know the master doesn't know us. That, unfortunately, is the state of affairs in America today. Now, something about compassion, because that seems to be the argument that you seem to be advancing here. Compassion is part of natural law. And it arises naturally between the relationship of the mother and her child, and it arises naturally in the relationship of comradeship amongst the hunters. It is a natural human experience. It is very hard to extinguish. It's very hard to put it down. But there is one thing that can destroy compassion, and only one thing, and that's when you force it. When you make people be compassionate. Kiss compassion goodbye, the only thing that will defeat it. Now I want to say something about our standard of living, to which you attended. And the standard of living here in America, let us understand that there's no doubt that the amount of money between rich and poor has grown. That gap is wider. But the quality of life of the poorer has relatively improved with regard to the rich on every imaginable standard. Just take the question of how long you live. The poor live far, far more longer than that increased for them far more than it did for the rich. Survival, far more for them than the rich. Disease, far more. The access to music. There was a time 100 years ago when only the rich, because they had servants and because music had come to them. Now everyone's got stereos and DVDs and CDs and cell phones and this and that. Everybody has got access to all of these things. This entire thing permeates the poor. If you go to the worst kind of shambly little trailer tract, little run-down house, and you walk in, there's 2 TVs and a TV, and they're on the cell phone, and they got this, and there's nobody is going really hungry, nobody is going hungry, and anyone can get into a hospital. These are all things that relatively the poor have improved, and their condition has moved up relative to the rich in terms of the quality of life. And on the most important standard, which is what brings happiness, it's not wealth and it's not poverty. Because the third world very much have poor people that are happy. Why is it, what brings about happiness? Earned success is the most important index of happiness. And earned success is all about the American dream, the possibility of going up. And in the course of those people moving forward and going up, and that whole action, and everyone's boat starts to lift. And that's why we are the extraordinary place we are today.
Wow, I don't know where to start there, but just, you know, I guess when you talk about relative increase in well-being and sort of life, I guess,
when you're absolutely poverty-stricken and you have nothing, and your relative, when you make it up to the middle class or whatever, lower middle class or even working poor, your relative increase is higher, than the person that's up here and incrementally getting higher. So I guess maybe that's true, but this idea that I guess it just comes down to me. It comes down to fairness, and this idea that it's okay that 40 million Americans are living in poverty. That's not okay for me. That's not acceptable. That there are 1.5 million homeless children. To me, that's shameful. That's not okay. So I don't, I guess I'm just not happy to sit back and say, oh, that's okay. So you can call that social engineering or whatever you want to call it. You can give it any pejorative you want. But to sit back and do nothing, as you mentioned, has an unintended consequences as well. But it also has an intended consequence. It means that those people are not going to have the opportunity to work. So this idea of a rising tide lifts all boats is very closely connected to trickle-down economics. And trickle-down economics for me is when you're peeing on me and telling me it's rich. Because that is trickle-down. It's not. It's not something. It's something that's been proven wrong every step of the way.
All right, thank you.
We're going to go to the question portion of the evening. Before we do, one of the debaters has requested he would like to hand something out.
I wanted to make a gift to all of you, a lovely bound volume of the Constitution. And there's a couple of people who are going to pass them out. Thank you.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to walk around with the microphone. I'm going to take questions. I'm going to hand anyone who wants to ask a question the microphone. We're going to go back and forth. So whatever the first question is, let's say it's for Marvin, we'll take that question, but then I'm going to ask the next one be for Arthur, so we can go back and forth and have it flow. Once the question is asked, the person who it's asked of will have 2 minutes to respond, and then the other debater will have 2 minutes to rebut that.
Can we make comments?
Yes. Yes, okay. Even if you can hear yourself, just talking around.
So, Marvin, you said in your rebuttal that there are no people going hungry, there is no real poverty, people have CD players, and I just, my question for you is where is that coming from? Because having been to Virginia and the outer parts of Roanoke, having been to New Orleans, my hometown, and even having been to parts of New York and upstate New York, and even been to Vermont, to trailer parks in Bennington, where people actually are going hungry and where families are literally buying, bread that's moldy and trying to make it last. The kids are going to school without breakfast. I document families who have this happening. I'm just wondering where that's coming from and how you can say that, because I've firsthand seen, a lot of people who are living in poverty that I would say resembles, it's not exactly, but resembles what I've seen in Africa, and it's upsetting to me. So I'd like to know why you said that.
Yeah, thank you for that question. It was a slight misstatement or overstatement. Obviously, there's going to be, with hundreds of millions of people, there's going to be these kinds of pockets that inevitably arise under any circumstance and condition. They do exist, and it gives me a chance to address two things. One, conservatives are in favor of a social safety net. We are in favor of a social safety net that deals with those who go past a point where they themselves cannot lift themselves, to give them a hand to lift themselves. Once they have that hand, not to then carry it into and becoming a way of life, turning it into the nanny state. And secondly, the main area of helping others and neighbors needs to be not so much the state or the government, but it needs to be civil society, volunteer organizations and associations. And that's what Tocqueville spoke about in the 19th century. America was, in contrast to Europe, characterized by its civil society, its rich civil society, and it is still, to this day, has those characteristics. So I really appreciate that question. I overstated the point, and you gave me a chance to make it more clear.
So now I have 2 minutes, right? Okay, so thanks to the Constitution, Mark. I have my own here. And I'd like to read actually the first sentence.
Does it have a groovy binding?
It doesn't have a groovy binding, but it's a working proletariat. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Well, you know, conservatives are all for providing for the defense of the country, especially when it involves $700 billion a year of military contracts. But they're not so much for the promotion of general welfare. And the reason I wanted to read this right from the Constitution, because it's kind of gimmicky to hand out a Constitution. Let's be fair. You know, like the right wing thinks that it owns the Constitution. It's you know, we want the Constitution. We want our country back. That's what we hear. Right in the first sentence, promote the general welfare, and that's the thing that right wingers just can't get behind. And progressives are. That's the whole idea of progressivism, is to promote the general welfare so that everybody can share in the pie.
Thank you. Question for Arthur?
Now, is that how we do this, or?
It's your down.
Okay.